everybody. Welcome to the IncGamers podcast and vidcast, and I believe live stream as well. My name is Peter Parrish. You will know that if you've listened or watched some of these before. And I'm sorry that I introduce everyone every time, but if people are new to it, then it is useful. So I'm going to say hello now to Tim McDonald. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
And also to Paul Younger. Hello, Mr. Paul Younger.
Hello.
Got the Dungeon Keeper devil behind you there this week, I see. Very good.
Yeah, I plugged him in. He needed to go up. He was getting knackered, just lying around.
We really are staying current with the advertising we've got going on in the background, aren't we?
Only the best.
It's so people can't accuse us of selling out and being corporate shills, because if we're shilling for games that are like 15 or 20 years old, it's kind of, who cares really? I suppose GOG might be sponsoring us, but other than that, it's all fine. So, speaking of more modern and up-to-date games, I hear the hip new thing with games is for them to be always online, and this hasn't necessarily worked out brilliantly for SimCity, which is out today in the US, and they've been having, as perhaps could have been predicted, one or two server problems with issues with downloading from Origin, issues with getting into the game if you've even managed to download it through Origin. Paul, is this the bold new dawn of digital gaming in action?
Well, oddly enough, this is exactly what I asked Mr. Quigley about last week when we did the interview, and one of my questions was this one of the reasons that they had a 1 hour session limit for the stress, which was a stress test for the beta over 3 beta, and he reassured me that the infrastructure had gone in place and that everything was all going to be hunky-dory and fine, and well, guess what? Everyone logged on at midnight and everything went boom. So yeah, you know what, it's to be expected actually. I think any game that's online only and everybody's pre-ordered and they're all trying to get it down to Origin at the same time is going to have massive problems. So what's to be expected, which is why I asked the question, and I guess I got the answer that he was going to say. He wasn't going to say, no, it's a complete wank, and the whole thing is going to fall over immediately. So yeah, there's a lot of unhappy people wanting refunds. I really don't understand why people want refunds because they can't get in the game at midnight, and they have to wait maybe 2 or 3 hours to get it down, and they're wanting refunds. I mean, God almighty, how desperate do you really have to be?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously very reasonable to be frustrated and annoyed and upset because you've paid for this game in advance, probably, and you're expecting to be able to play it when it's released. A full refund is perhaps a bit much, but Tim, you're desperate to say something.
Is anyone actually surprised by this? I mean, when was the last time a game with an online-only component, MMO or otherwise, actually launched without massive problems? Anyone? No.
Yeah, but I guess, rather than just accepting it, though, don't we have to kind of say, well, this is something that needs to be addressed, because obviously as more and more games probably get delivered this way and sold this way, how are they gonna figure this one out?
I quite agree. It's a complete crock of shit. I just don't think that anyone should necessarily be surprised. Although then again, this has happened a lot. I mean, does anyone remember when Half-Life 2 launched and had the exact same issue? Steam broke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Is this something down to the fact that servers cost lots of money, and so they try and put in place the number of servers for the average user base they're expecting, rather than the massively heightened one they will inevitably have at launch?
I don't know.
I think that's...
Is it?
I think when they do like launch stuff, when it's download online only and it's download, I think they should just have a massive capacity, just way more than you could ever imagine that you'd need, and then just keep your customers happy. Okay, it may be a little bit more expensive, but then at least your forums and your Twitter and everything else that is sending the information back to people waiting for it. At least people are getting hold of this stuff, and it may cost a little bit more, but everyone just seems to underestimate it all the time. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest PC game releases this year, so it was inevitable that people were going to be screaming to get into this thing at midnight. So I don't know. I don't understand why the infrastructure isn't ready and in place.
I suspect they make a business calculation and they under provide servers and think, well, a few people will be pissed off for a while, but then they'll get into the game and they'll forget all about it, and we won't have to have spent quite as much money. It's a bit of a cynical view, but I think that's the calculation they make. The sort of, what do we need to spend on versus how many people will it annoy? Will that have repercussions later on for like further sales and stuff? And if they think no, it won't, then who cares? Let people be annoyed, because they'll just have to deal with it.
No,
Just like Half-Life 2.
Are people really going to call in for refunds, or really? I mean, just
I don't know.
Okay, so it's 8 hours late. Big deal. You're not going to die, are you?
People are going to call in for refunds if they get the slightest excuse. People like their money and they don't like paying for games.
I don't know what grounds you have for a refund. I mean, I know the UK laws, you have more leeway with that than I think you do in the US. I don't know if I was promised delivery of this game at like midnight and it didn't happen. Am I entitled to a refund? I don't know, legally speaking, whether you are on that.
To be fair, the people who pre-ordered are likely to be the ones who want to be playing immediately, and they are also probably the ones who are therefore most likely to complain if they can't play immediately. Well, no, I can't say I'm entirely surprised that the servers fell over, nor am I entirely surprised that lots of people are calling for refunds. It's the way of it, unfortunately. That's not a good thing.
It's just such an abusive relationship. You've got so you have the publisher who hypes people up and amps people up into a state of, desperation for pre-order stuff, because they're eager to sell as many pre-orders as possible. So they get everyone G'd up and excited. And then they go, oh, actually, no, you can't play yet. So I'm honestly not surprised when people react quite badly. I don't know. Maybe you are entitled to a refund for this kind of fuck up. I'm not sure.
Get the refund and then go and buy it again. Because you're going to probably want to buy it again anyway. But just get the refund, just so you can just moan.
I think part of it is that games are a very current medium. I mean, the press are as guilty of this as anyone, but we talk about what's new. There's not a great deal of looking back. Once something's been out for 2 weeks, people tend to start forgetting about it and looking at the next big thing. So there is a big focus on releases and on launch week, which is also where the majority of sales seem to come from as well, which again feeds into it. I think it's a very now-focused medium.
Yeah. Well, although, that said, we haven't got our review code for SimCity yet, so it's not that now-focused, is it?
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with that either. It's like some European... I talked to Tim about this yesterday. Some European territories have got review code. Some Americans had like a press review platform to do it on. But in the UK, there's just nothing like that. It's basically, oh, hello. The wildlife is in.
Kitty!
Oh no, don't you start, Tim.
IncGamers cat. They're everywhere.
This is Dusty, the IncGamers cat. So I've totally lost my track of what I was saying now.
I don't care. I'm looking at the cat.
This is no good for people just listening to the audio, is it? Like, you just have to imagine cats if you can.
Oh,
if you're capable of doing so.
I know what I was talking about. The different platforms, the reviewing platforms. It just seems to be different no matter where we are. But we've been told we won't get access to it until the EU servers go live on midnight on Thursday night midnight, which is Friday morning. So we'll review it then. But having said that, I've seen some reviews out already, and for fuck's sake, it's SimCity. How can you get a review out in such a short period of time? It's a complex game.
I am a little bit suspicious about the ones that are based on whatever special review period was provided by EA. Yeah, because unless they had the servers up for like a week, that's a little bit quick, I think.
Oh, Tim, get a grip. Look here.
Tim, just buy a cat, Tim.
Look, there's Tim.
Paul's got some cats. I've got a couple of cats now. Tim, you need a cat. It just needs to happen. SimCity reviews.
We've been hijacked.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there's not much we can do about the SimCity situation. Obviously, they will probably endeavour to be getting their servers up and ready, and we hope that the European ones don't suffer the same problems. They probably will, and then we'll be taking a look at the game and reviewing it for probably next week or something like that. I'm gonna try and lure Tim out of his cat-related hypnosis now.
Sorry, I heard my name.
The next bit of interesting news that came out today, which was rumored yesterday, but wasn't confirmed until today, that Thief 4 has been re-revealed. It was revealed originally back in 2009, called well, it's difficult to pronounce because it had a 4 in the name. The fourth, I suppose, is probably what it was called. It's now just called Thief. Nice and simple. You're going to play Garrett again. Tim, what?
Why is it called Thief?
I don't know. They like doing this, don't they? As soon as a series gets to around the sort of 4 or 5 mark, they start getting really nervous about calling it number 4, and for some reason they don't want to give it a subtitle. All the other previous Thief games had subtitles. There's Thief the Dark Project, Thief the Metal Age, Thief Deadly Shadows. I don't see why it couldn't be Thief whatever the hell. But no, they just go back to Thief.
Probably why they've called it Thief was because the first one was the Dark Project, so they can get away with it on this one. But for fuck's sake, this naming convention gets on my tits.
It is really annoying.
Rambo, Rocky Balboa, probably some other examples. There was DMC Devil May Cry, but Tomb Raider.
It was Devil May Cry, Devil May Cry.
It was, yeah. That was. At least this one isn't called Thief Thief. I mean, I'm thankful for that at least. So yeah, we don't know a huge amount yet, but we know a whole lot more than we did over the past 3 years or so. Yeah, you're going to play as Garrett again. It appears to be following on from the third one. It's kind of hard to tell from the screenshots, but I think he's got his like mechanical eye thing, which means it's not a prequel, because otherwise he wouldn't have that. It's going to be in first person, at least to some degree, because there's been plenty of first person screenshots floating around. It might have a third person option like Deadly Shadows did. What we don't know is whether Stephen Russell will be voicing Garrett again, which is kind of a big deal.
It's the single most important thing about it.
Yeah, which they have not confirmed or denied at this point. I have asked them, so we'll see if they're willing to talk about that. It might be in the US publication, which is carrying this exclusive article. I'm not going to advertise because fuck them. And yeah, that's about it. We know that it'll be using the same. They've made the right kind of noises about it using the same sort of open level design as the previous games. It's going to be quite based in the city. That's all the city's called in the Thief series. It's just called the city. And the main antagonist appears to be the Baron, who has been mentioned in previous games. Now he seems to be sort of have a tyrannical grip on the city. And do you know what? It sounds quite Dishonored-y, actually. I feel a little bit bad for them because Dishonored came out obviously last year. It had this city with a plague in it, which Thief 4 has also mentioned, and with a tyrannical ruler. And if people aren't aware of the Thief lineage, they're probably going to be going, this is just Dishonored, what's this all about?
So, again, we've got an interesting naming convention actually going on within Thief, insofar as we've got the city and the Baron. Is Garrett actually Garrett in this, or is he just the Thief?
No, he's Garrett, the Master Thief, which I think he's always...
You will be playing the Thief in the city with the Baron. I mean, they've really thought hard about this one. Alright, Dave, you got any names for this? Oh, no, fuck it. We'll just call it the city.
To be fair, this has always been the naming convention in the series. The city has always just been the city. It's like, it's very feudal and medieval. People haven't travelled around very far. They're not aware of anything outside of it. So that's just where we live, the city. And, the Baron was only ever mentioned in sort of passing readable notes and so on and so forth. So he wasn't really... He wasn't named at the time. He might get a name. I don't know. Anyway, I'm
Baron Munchausen.
Baron von Munchausen. Yeah, hopefully. I'm quite pleased to have this finally revealed. It's due in 2014, supposedly, on PC, of course, and other newfangled console devices. Yeah, about a year ago, I wrote a list of 10 things that I thought Thief 4 would have to include, and it's addressed one of them already, which is dropping the stupid logo that had the 4 in the name. So I'm hopeful.
But that's mandatory. You have to have the 4. You have to have the 4.
No, there's no 4s.
I'm disappointed.
Well, just gonna have to deal with it, I'm afraid. Tim, I'm gonna go to you guys. I think you've played more Thief than Paul has. Anything else to add about this? Interests you, excites you about this? Anything that concerns you?
I'm looking forward to it. It's the same studio that did Deus Ex Human Revolution, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, Deus Ex Human Revolution kind of had the open plan levels for a fair few of the areas, so they've got some decent pedigree there. There hasn't really been a bad Thief game. I know a lot of people are quite down on Deadly Shadows, the third one. Oh god, that didn't have a number in it either.
No, none.
I know there were quite a lot of people who were quite down on that. But I really enjoyed it. There hasn't been a Thief game that I haven't enjoyed, and I suspect that this will probably be good. I'm looking forward to it. The screenshots do look... They've got the right ambience, I think, because Thief always had a very gothic sort of architecture. Yeah, it looks like Thief. I haven't heard anything about the gameplay yet, so that's kind of the important thing.
It's early days, isn't it?
And obviously Stephen Russell, which is the other really important thing.
Yeah.
I actually did an interview about Thief 4. Was it about 3 years ago?
Yeah, it was about
2 years. Whenever it was first announced.
Oh yeah, that was 09. That's going to be about 3 years, maybe even 4 years ago.
I believe we actually had the first interview on that.
We did.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we had any groundbreaking, amazing details, but there you go.
It depends if no comment is a groundbreaking, amazing detail, I think.
I think it was mostly just, they were saying that they were trying to stay fairly true to Thief Past. But if it's still on the site, give it a look.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all I would ask for, really, is to stay true to the tenets of the series. Stuff like, what I really loved about the original was the expert mode, which meant that if you were great at the game, you never killed anyone. Your skill at the game was measured by how few people you would kill, and that just really stood out back then, and I think it would stand out again, frankly, in the current climate of murdering everyone in every game ever.
Actually, do you know what I do want to see is the same style of cutscenes, because I really, really like the kind of animated drawings, which is a really bad way of describing it, but it was kind of still pictures that were animated, had animated elements. They were really, really nice, and I would love to see them come back rather than something all 3D rendered and pretty.
Yeah, Deadly Shadows didn't... Well, Deadly Shadows was weird because it had some sort of animated-ish cutscenes and some really bad CG cutscenes that it looked like they shoved in at the last minute and didn't quite finish.
I think those were actually just in-engine, but they were actually lower than the resolution most people were playing on at the time anyway.
Yeah,
they were 640 by 480 blown up to full screen, and they looked hideous.
Yeah, they definitely did.
I mean, it wasn't a great-looking game anyway, but because of the lighting and the darkness and so on, it didn't really have to be. It had atmosphere. It was
very blue
and beautiful.
It was very blue. That's what I remember about Deadly Shadows. A lot of blue everywhere. I take back actually an earlier comment that none of the Thief games had a number in it. Of course, Thief 2 was called Thief 2. It just also had a subtitle as well. But then they dropped that for the next one. So yeah, Thief... well, I suppose we have to keep calling it Thief now, but I want to keep calling it Thief 4 anyway.
Thief. So they're not living down calling it Thief 4.
Yeah. So yes, we'll look forward to more information about that coming out. I am chasing them for some sort of interview because I want to know more about it as well. So we'll see how that goes. You never know with these things. They might say yes or they might completely ignore me. Who knows? Okay, other thing that I noted this week was kind of two things that relate to one another. EA in a conference call last week, pretty much during when we were doing the podcast last week, made a lot of noises about their intentions to shove microtransactions into every single game that they're going to make from this point onwards. I can find the exact quote, actually. It came from EA's Bleak Jorgensen in an investor call. He said, "We're building into all our games the ability to pay for things along the way, either to get to a higher level, to buy a new character, to buy a truck, a gun, whatever it might be, and consumers are enjoying and embracing that way of the business." Don't know what data he's basing that on, but he seems sure about that. But in a related note, the EA published Warhammer Wrath of Heroes, a free-to-play game based entirely on microtransactions, closed the day afterwards, after not even managing to leave beta. Presumably, I mean, the reason they gave was that the developers were moving on to mobile games and stuff, but presumably that indicates that it was not terribly profitable, because if it had been, I'm sure it would still have been going to this day. So yeah, a few issues to grapple with there. Who has something to say about this?
I've always got something to say, even if it's just a snarky comment. In this case, I'm kind of interested when they say that consumers are enjoying and embracing that way of business. I'm curious as to, like you said, what data they've got from this. I'd love to see data from Dead Space 3 as to how many people actually bought microtransactions from that. Because you really didn't have to in that. On PC, at least, they weren't particularly intrusive. They never felt necessary. The game wasn't built around them. They just kind of felt like they were bolted on at the last minute. And that's fine by me, quite frankly. I didn't need them, and I never felt like I was missing out on anything, so I didn't really care. I'm curious about that. Did you also say that Wrath of Heroes shut down the day after they said this?
Yep.
Wow. This is just like when EA said they weren't going to do any sort of Steam-style sales on Origin, and then the very next day did a sale on Origin.
Yeah.
Do EA actually know what EA is doing?
I suspect not. I mean, the Wrath of Heroes is part of their play for free branch. I mean, EA is gigantic. You know, who knows what branch A is doing in relation to branch B, C, D, E, and F. They probably had no idea.
It just seems like every time EA says something, they then manage to counter it the very next day through their own actions.
That's a little bit like Ocean Quigley saying that the servers would be an infrastructure would be in place for SimCity, and then the next day, lo and behold, well, not quite the next day actually. It was a couple of days, but
back on topic. I think I actually I've given my opinion on this through that. I don't like microtransactions, but as long as they aren't essential and they aren't hopelessly intrusive, I don't really care. As long as the game actually functions properly without them and I'm not missing out on tons of stuff. If you have to pay extra to actually get through the game, then that's complete bullshit, as is the case with a lot of games on sort of the app stores on mobile. But yeah, with Dead Space 3, as I say, despite all the constant worry about that, it really wasn't a big deal as far as I'm concerned. There is the inevitable worry that with this, they're now actually going to start planning for them more in games, and they will be a bit more required, which is what I'm afraid of. But if the game itself is fine and I don't have to use microtransactions because I won't use microtransactions, then I don't really care.
Paul, how about you? Microtransactions.
Yeah, I don't actually have a problem with them. As long as you don't need to do it to finish. I mean, if it's like getting a nice hat, we all like hats, don't we? Then
apparently, yes.
Then it doesn't. That doesn't bother me at all. As long as you don't need to buy something to finish it. I mean, I guess what I have a problem with is when they make it so difficult and you have to grind and grind and grind to get the same equivalent of that. That pisses me off. I'll talk more about that later. when we get onto what we're playing and stuff. But
Uh-huh.
as long as you don't need something to finish it, I don't have a problem. If people want to spend money on it, then why not? If the system's in place, let EA shove the system in place as long as it doesn't affect me. I mean, I'm certainly not going to pay, $40 or $60 for a game and then go and pump another 10 in for a hat. But I need that hat to finish the game. I'm not going to be happy with that.
The worry about it, the problem with it is just the threat that it is going to creep and it is gradually going to become more and more important. You kind of see this with pre-order deals where there's exclusive guns that you can only get if you buy it from one particular place, and in that sense it does kind of feel like you're missing out. With Dead Space 3, you could get access to absolutely everything in the game, barring the various cosmetic bullshit that was pre-order stuff, but everything that actually mattered within the game, as far as I know, you could build in the game. The microtransactions were simply for extra resources in case you wanted to buy a new gun a bit sooner than normal. I'm all right with that, horrible as it sounds. I don't like the idea of essentially paying for cheats, but it's nothing new, and EA have been doing that in games for quite a while, particularly on Xbox. There have been all sorts of things where you can shell out £8 and you unlock all the cars in a racing game, for instance, which seems to be kind of missing the point for me. But if people want to do it, what the hell? I'm not going to do it, and it doesn't affect the game for me in any way. So,
is this the equivalent of the old tip hotlines that would cost like £2 per minute?
They found a way to bring them back into the digital age, you mean?
Yeah, yes. Exactly. Yeah, it's basically the tips hotline, but you get it a little bit more quickly. I don't know. I'm more down on these than both of you, I think. Even when they don't affect me, it bothers me that they're affecting other people. Because
other people shouldn't use them then.
Yeah, but there's a power imbalance here. The publisher has all the power of the hype and the advertising and the pressure. Like, we're all relatively informed gamers, all right? We know to look out for these kind of traps in games and what we do need to pay for and what we don't need to pay for. Other people don't necessarily know that, and it concerns me when the stuff like this starts creeping in. And I don't think it's good long term, because I think if people get burned on a game where they kind of get hooked into shelling out a bunch of microtransactions and one of those games where you have to either grind to get the stuff or pay out, and then they find, oh, hang on, I've spent an awful lot of money on this. I think that's then going to sour them for a while on the video games. I think it's. I'm concerned about that. I just don't like it. I don't like an upfront price, a one-off price on a game with microtransactions on top. I think if you want to pay, you should stick to one payment model. Don't try and bundle them all up together and try and milk every last penny out of someone.
Milk it.
It's just really, I don't know. I'm a lame romanticist who thinks that creative works, which I put these games under, shouldn't be soured by this disgusting march of capitalist thinking.
I'll
basically.
I'll resist the urge to scoff that you managed to use the phrase "creative works" in a discussion about EA, but I do largely agree. I don't like it, and you do have some good points there. It is a bit of a worry for those who tend to play many games. They've bought Dead Space 3, seen the microtransactions, and possibly bought them because they thought they had to. That is something I hadn't actually considered. I'd be happier if they weren't there. But yeah, purely selfishly, they don't affect me one way or the other unless they do start getting built into the actual game itself. I don't know. I don't like it, but it's not something that affects me, I suppose.
I don't know. I don't know how it would be stopped. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's coming in. I think we're reaching the point where they've kind of almost exhausted what they can do with pre-orders. You know, you look at something like the Assassin's Creed games where there's about 20 different pre-order versions, and you can now pre-order to get in alphas. You can pre-order to get in betas. I think they're reaching the limit there, so they need another revenue source out of people. And I think this is what they might move to. I just don't like the whole, just vote with your dollars then, don't buy them because that's not enough. Gamers as a whole aren't a labor union. We're not an organized force who can, as one, say, no, we're not going to stand for this. You've also got outliers who aren't part of this kind of gaming hub. They're not as informed as the people who follow this stuff.
So what you're
no matter.
What you're
Sorry,
saying then, Peter, is we need to form a union.
Yes, absolutely.
We must
gaming union.
We must sort this out.
I've thought for a long time that game developers should have a union because they get treated like absolute shit, apparently, as far as I can tell. Working terrible hours, getting laid off without a moment's notice. It's not good. There you go. That's my little bit of Marxism for the day. Yeah, that's the news this week, I think. Let's talk about some games now. You know what? The most recent one, I think, would be Tomb Raider, which Tim has been playing. Yes, you have, Tim. You've been playing Tomb Raider. I know.
I'm surprised. I thought from that, with Paul giving us a nice little segue, you were going to go over to Paul.
I could go to Paul. Should we save Tomb Raider to later? Paul, would you like to talk about World of Warplanes before Tomb? No.
All right. Okay. I'll do it.
It is a nice little segue actually with the microtransactions aspect.
Fuck you, Tim.
Yay!
Okay. Yeah, I've there's been a new patch for World of Warplanes, and I haven't been in it for a while, so this was quite a significant update for wargaming. Which, for those who don't know, World of Warplanes is their free-to-play aerial combat title that is basically like World of Tanks, but in the sky, effectively, and not in a tank.
Flying tanks.
I've got a question. Why is it called World of Warplanes? I mean, the other one's called World of Tanks. Shouldn't this just be World of Planes, or should that be World of War Tanks? I'd play World of War Tanks.
I can't remember. I think I can't actually remember why they changed it. Oh, because they released warships. That was it. So they wanted warplanes, warships, and whatever. I can't even remember what it was called before. World of Flying Things or something. I don't know.
I can't wait for the infantry one called World of War Man.
Oh God, look, you're going way off topic here. I'm going to bring us back on track.
There's a lot of naming chat in this week's podcast.
Yeah, it hasn't got It hasn't got 4 where the A is or anything like that. But it's their
World of Warplanes.
And shut up! God damn it, Tim, or I'll cut you off.
When he talks about Tomb Raider, Paul, you know what to do.
Yeah, don't you worry.
But what about Lara's hair?
Yeah,
Tell me about that.
Or her breast bigger this one. Yeah.
I'll mute my microphone. I'll just make my snide comments to myself for a bit.
Okay, brilliant. Anyway, going back to what I was saying, they've basically redone the flight model and the control system. I know if anyone who's played it before, the control system was just actually bloody awful. So what they've done is the whole idea is that they want people to be able to play this game either with a joystick or a mouse or a keyboard, and each person, depending on what your preference was, you'd have wouldn't have an unfair advantage. So they've put in the couple of different mouse modes. One is the World of Tanks mouse mode, although I have no idea why you'd want to use a World of Tanks mouse mode for something that is basically 360 degrees. It's bizarre. So I had a shot on that yesterday and was trying that out, and the World of Tanks mode was a bit shit. So then flipped over to the new mouse control system they've got in, which is a big improvement on what was there already. But having said that, I still have issues with this. I mean, the game is still in closed beta. It's not ready to come out yet. They have improved the graphics engine. It does look nicer than what they had before. This is something that they're incrementally doing. They're doing it all the time, although there is still quite a bit. I mean, I had everything up full, and I could still see stuff popping in the distance, which was a bit disappointing. I'd be flying along, and then suddenly a big dam would appear, and I've got everything up full. So that was a bit weird. But the biggest problem I have
is that a problem? Does it just pop up in front of you and you crash into it, or
no? It's not that close. It's not that.
If you had it on low settings, would that be a problem?
Yeah, it's not that close. But it's just kind of considering they've been working on the engine. I was just a bit surprised to see it. But the thing I have
when this happens,
Oh, Tim, I'm going to come round and honestly, I'm going to put a fucking hammer in your head if you don't shut up.
It's gone a bit Hotline Miami in the podcast
Yeah.
all of a sudden.
Let me get it out, god damn it. The thing I have with this game is there is another competitive product in the market. In fact, I'm just going to say it's War Thunder, which is effectively exactly the same premise. It works on the same system where you gain XP and you can buy microtransactions to improve your... Now, the two games, War Thunder now, I think today hit 1 million pilots or whatever they wanted to call it that have joined the game. And I think it's an open beta now, and I think it's just gone on Steam. Now, when you compare the two... and I did this last night because I wanted to see how much changed in World of Warplanes. Honestly, when I'm in World of Warplanes, I feel like I am flying a tank, and this goes down to what they said. They said in this update they're trying to make the flight models as much realistic as possible for the different types of aircraft. Now there is a point where it becomes realistic, where the fun starts to come out of the game.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether they're pushing it so that the realism is so much that effectively the manoeuvrability isn't as fun. But when I went into War Thunder a bit later on, the game is more fun. There is a sensation of speed. When you're in World of Warplanes, you just kind of feel like you're farting along. Although you might be supposed to be doing like 200 miles an hour or something, but it feels like you're going about 10. The other thing that's different between the two as well is the cockpit view which they have in War Thunder, which I actually quite like. It sort of does add a little extra bit of authenticity to it. It doesn't have that in World of Warplanes. You have a third-person view, or you have this sort of HUD view. Now, it works okay in World of Warplanes. It's pretty good. It's effective. I can't really complain about it. I think it's improved. The interface has improved greatly. But when I compare the two, for the fun factor, I've been getting more out of War Thunder. But I think Wargaming are going in the right direction with the game, but I don't think it's maybe as far along as they would like it to be at this point. I don't know. Although they have tweaked the game and they've improved the game, I still find it a bit of a hassle. I mean, even when I went into like a single player sort of bot battle, I mean, the bloody bots are flying into each other and dying, and you'd win a dogfight just because the bots had flown into each other and crashed. So there's just pretty weird stuff like that. I know that's not anything to do with the online component of it, but also there's the objectives. There's just not enough objectives in World of Warplanes right now. It's all dogfighting in itself isn't that fun. It's okay, but it isn't that fun. You need to have to go off and do something, have a mission, stop people. I know this is stuff that will probably be coming. I just don't know how far down the road in development the game actually is. But between the two, I think War Thunder's kind of acing it at the moment.
So to also link it back, both of them are free to play. So what microtransaction models do they both have? Sort of comparing the two.
Well, it's very similar. It's basically gain experience, or what I think in War Thunder it's lions or whatever it is. And if you played World of Tanks, then you'll know exactly.
Lions.
Yeah, I know, bizarre. If you play World of Tanks, you know exactly how it's going to work in World of Warplanes. It's exactly the same. You get more tiers of aircraft as you go along. You can, basically improve your loadouts, customize your aircraft, and I guess that's where the fun comes into it. Anyone who's really into it will be able to customize their aircraft in World of Warplanes to how they want the configuration. There are presets already there for people who can't be arsed, or to give you an idea of what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, it is fun, and it does look a lot better in this new patch that's come out than it did previously. But I still think it's not quite there yet. It's not as fun, I don't think, as it could be. And I think fun factor's it's very important in a game like this.
Yeah, I mean, the speed thing you mentioned sounds more, I guess, realism based. Because I mean, obviously, when you're in a commercial airliner, it doesn't feel like you're going at the speeds that they're going at. But obviously, if it's in a dogfighting video game, you kind of don't necessarily want it to be like Microsoft Flight Sim, do you?
Yeah, it's kind of really hard to explain. You just kind of, when you're banking and stuff, I don't know, it just became a little bit boring. It just became boring. I don't know. There is the difference between the two games. There is a difference in speed and the combat. The combat in War Thunder is faster, and that is maybe artificially done for the fun factor of it. If you see what I mean. I think World of Warplanes is getting there. I just don't think it's quite there yet, and I do think there's a bit of work to go on that one.
All right, cool, Tim. It is now your turn to talk about Tomb Raider. Prepare to be interrupted.
Tim, has she got massive jugs? Tim.
Did you want to protect her, Tim? Did you want to make her feel safe?
Did you survive the island? Did you?
Are there cannibals on the island, Tim? Are there tombs? Are there Tyrannosaurus Rexes?
More importantly, did she give you sweeties?
Who, Lara, all the people on the island, to try and lure you to an early death. I'm sorry, I'm going to shut up now at least.
No, it's fine. The more you talk, the less I have to. I'm going to sit here staring. Kitty!
Oh, no.
Oh, God. Oh, man. Are the cats?
Well, you really shouldn't let your cat in here.
Are the cats in Tomb Raider?
No.
Okay.
There are lots of animals which you can shoot and kill.
That's not very nice. That's quite sad. What's the bad
There
about
was
doing
one.
that in Red Dead Redemption?
Actually, kind of on topic of that, there was the one point that actually made me feel slightly uncomfortable. Wolves are one of the more common enemies earlier on, and they are really, really big. But there's a point a bit later on where you encounter a load of wolves in cages, and they can't actually get you, but you can still shoot and kill them for experience, which made me feel a little bit wrong.
That's just out of the question. I would not be doing that.
Tomb Raider, yeah, I quite like it. The first few hours are pretty weak, particularly they're very linear and dull, and there's quite a lot of really annoying QuickTime events that don't work too well on PC. Around about hour 3, it does pick up a lot, and it starts becoming very, very enjoyable indeed.
I love a game that I have to put 3 hours into before I start having a good time.
Actually, just before I start, we were talking about this the other day with Ellie, actually. And do you not think that this is a real problem with games? Most games that come out now, the first couple of hours are really usually quite shit. And it's not until you get into it you go,
It does happen on quite a few games. I know Assassin's Creed 3 is kind of infamous for this, having about a 20-hour tutorial process. I think maybe a bit in Far Cry 3 as well.
Assassin's Creed 3 has a lot more problems than just that.
Well, yeah.
Far Cry 3 does take, I think, an hour or two to get going as well. In this case, I think it's mostly because it's kind of Lara's just supposed to be kind of a university student. She's very much out of her depth, and it takes a while for her to actually, I don't know, start getting into it, I suppose, and trying to do things just to stay alive.
Oh, don't murder your cat.
Paul, don't wave a hammer at your cat, you dick.
Cat doesn't really seem to care.
Cats just don't care, though, do they?
No. So, well, that leads me to a question, Tim. The transition from a university student to cold-blooded, shotgun-wielding killer, is that handled well, or does that happen over the course of about 5 seconds? I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to humour you by asking it.
Yeah, it happens over the course of about 5 seconds. Oh, maybe 15 or 20. There's the infamous bit that we've seen before where someone tries to kill Lara and she gets hold of a gun and through the medium of QuickTime events shoots him in the head. Yeah. And then she kind of sits there kneeling and dry heaving for a moment, and then gets a radio call a few minutes later where she says to someone, "I killed someone." And the guy says, "Oh, that can't have been easy." And she goes, "No, it was scary just how easy it was." And then you're in a gunfight with about 5 people.
That's how it happens in real life, by the way. It's that easy to go from normal citizen to cold-blooded killer.
She's bloody good with guns as well. I mean, it's kind of hinted that she's had some serious training with firearms and bows as well before. This is kind of mentioned a few times, but she's a crack shot. Yeah, I do quite like it. There are two things I really want to talk about, actually, neither of which are particularly focused on the game. The first is I've only just learned about Tress FX.
Yes. Oh, this is
which
the
is
hair
amazing.
thing.
And yeah, it sounds when I was reading the page, it actually sounds like an April Fool's joke, but it clearly isn't. And I know how difficult hair is to animate properly. Unfortunately, I'm not running TressFX, so I can't tell you how amazing it is with that because I don't have a supercomputer or an AMD card. I have an NVIDIA card because I quite like my games to run.
Hey now.
Yeah, I'm not speaking from experience there. I haven't had an AMD card for quite a while. I don't really know what it's like these days.
You can have a lovely...
Yeah, TressFX is just bizarre. It's just little bits and pieces. I've got the page open here. Lara Croft is an iconic character with an equally iconic ponytail. Reimagining Lara and her haircut, 2013 release of Tomb Raider wasn't just an opportunity to modernise the character. It was an opportunity to substantially advance in-game realism by tackling the challenge of unrealistic hair.
Someone had to write that. Do you think they enjoyed writing that, or do you think they hated themselves when they were writing it? And which would you think would be better?
I would have loved to have written that because I would have just treated it as an April Fool's joke. It would have been amazing.
When they added game physics, when all the physics stuff kicked off, can you imagine someone trying to write a press release about the movement of her boobs?
I'm sure they would have been delighted to write a press release about that. Exactly.
It's as ridiculous as that, really, isn't it?
Didn't that happen back when Dead or Alive came out, though?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It probably did. To be fair to the ridiculous amount of emphasis placed on hair, the animation in general in the game is really, really good. And I kind of want to see it with TressFX running because I do think that it might actually add something to it, bizarrely enough.
I've seen a YouTube video of TressFX running and going a bit wrong, which is quite funny. It just looks like she's in a very, very bizarre kind of double wind tunnel. The hair kind of everywhere. It's quite good.
I can't remember what game it was. There was one which tried to do really, really impressive hair, and it was a character with long hair, and I think they basically divided it. No, Alice's hair was lovely though. In Madness Returns. No, this was something else, and it just kept going horribly wrong. They kind of divided the hair into 4 sections. It was like 2 at the front and 2 at the back, and as such, it was like you'd wind up with one going across there and another up here, and then the other 2 were out vertically, and they were just sort of swaying around constantly in a light breeze.
Is that the style you're going for today, Tim?
Today, mine.
That's the one I normally go for. The TressFX going wrong hairstyle.
Looks good. You're working it well.
Thanks.
God, we're even delving into fashion on the podcast, not just the interviews now. The other thing I actually wanted to talk about was, you know how with the old Tomb Raider games, a lot of the focus was kind of on killing off Lara. There were the people who would just play Tomb Raider to make her leap off a cliff or drown, as was Cat famously in Spaced, when Tim sits there drowning Lara repeatedly. Making her die in this, you can still leap her off things, and the body ragdolls quite a lot. At one point, I missed the jump in a collapsing walkway, and she fell down quite far and hit the ground, and then smashed into a pillar, and then fell off that. And the quick time event deaths are also fairly brutal. Some of them. So far, at the start, I managed to get her crushed by a boulder 5 times because the game really doesn't adequately explain how the quick time events work on PC, and I will probably stick a public service announcement in the review. But yeah, I've also had her sort of get shot in the face and strangled to death and so on, and yeah, it's kind of horrible. The thing is, I think...
Is this a little bit weird? I mean, do you feel like they're catering to some sort of freaky fetish market with this, or do you think it's part of the lineage of the series that she always kind of died pretty brutally? And in fairness, in a lot of video games, the protagonist dies quite brutally. I mean, in Limbo, for example, I kind of experienced a multitude of horrible deaths.
It's a bit of both, I think. I mean, at the start as well, the first couple of hours of the game do have a very survival horror feeling because you don't really have any weapons, you're not sure what's going on, you're going through a lot of very creepy areas with skulls and corpses and so on. So it does kind of fit that vibe, and the game is generally darker than the previous entries in the series. So it doesn't feel over the top or ridiculous, it does feel fitting. But the point I was going to make was I think that the developers worked this out because over the course of the game, Lara gets beaten up so much. It's insane. Not by the other characters, just by the environment, because she's not the super athletic gymnastic adventurer. I mean, I think she's, at this point in the game, she's probably fallen off 2 waterfalls, smashed into a variety of trees, fallen off more things than I can count. There have been, I think, 2 or 3 sections in the game so far where the plot has basically required me to seek medical attention. And she is just, if in the next game she isn't just a mass of scars and burns, I'm going to be quite surprised and disappointed. Yeah, it's possibly going a little bit too far with that, but it does kind of illustrate that she is at the start of her career. It's very sort of Batman year 1, in terms of the fact that she's not very good at this, and she is slamming into things quite a lot, and yeah, is miraculously surviving.
No broken legs.
No, not yet. I mean, she does obviously get a spike impaled through her at the very beginning, as we saw in the videos, the early videos released, which gets patched up a little bit later on. Actually, no, I think that's one of the wounds that's fine once she's had a nap.
Yeah, I mean, throughout this discussion, we've kind of touched on the fact that the sort of thematic idea for this game was the Lara against the elements and her progression from normal person to the Tomb Raider we know and love. It kind of seems like they haven't entirely succeeded with that angle. It seems a little bit kind of ham-fisted, possibly, with things like that. Like, oh, I've had a sleep, my leg's better now.
Yeah, it doesn't happen so much. I mean, like I say, there are various points where your objective is basically to find a first aid kit because she desperately needs one after the latest mishap. And yeah, she is generally not very happy about a lot of the things she has to do. What I will say is that it is becoming a bit more believable that she's kind of going on a bit more of a rampage at this point, after everything she's been through. It's right at the very beginning that it's a little bit odd that she's so happy to kill people after the very first one. But at this point, it does kind of fit and it doesn't feel out of place. There is...
Oh, Tim.
A little bit convenient to... Fairly early on where she decides she needs to fight. And you literally, from where she says this, you go down a zip line and then walk down 6 stairs and there's 2 giant fuel tanks there, which is a little bit convenient and contrived, and the start of the game does that a fair bit. But again, it picks up a lot thereafter. It gets a lot better, certainly.
Our transatlantic link.
I think my Skype's doing weird shit.
So.
Yeah. It's Skype's fault. It's not mine. I'm just gonna fill time while it hopefully gets back.
Everyone was kind of breaking up a bit there.
It kept good. It kept good at my end. It's just I feared if I started talking, I'd break up. Am I sounding all right again now?
Yes, you seem to be.
Broadly. Okay, excellent. Is this a good? Paul, you all right? Good. Trying to see if the cat was moving in the background. Is this a good time to talk about Crysis 3 then? Which is the game I have been playing. We're always timely with the reviews and the code on it. Yeah, it's one of the main thematic drives of Crysis 3 is the main character, Lawrence Prophet Barnes's fight with whether he can retain his humanity when he's sort of embodied in the Crysis nanosuit, or whether he's kind of slowly becoming a bit of a soulless machine. So it's humanity against cold, rational Tim. Go on.
I was just going to ask, is this a plot that you actually care about?
No, but I'm kind of building to this. So the theme is man versus soulless machine, and kind of the game as a whole suffers a little bit from this, like seeking humanity out of a kind of cold, rational, technical, presentational point of view. Because as you'd expect from a CryEngine 3 game, it looks very nice, even on my well, not my, I mean, my PC is pretty decent, but I could only really get to about medium settings on Crysis 3, but nonetheless, it still looked very nice. It is very slickly and smoothly presented. It's a very competent first-person shooter, but it is pretty much lacking a heart. I mean, they have tried to kind of build the world and kind of give you scope and context and emotional weight to your actions, but they, in general, have not succeeded. I mean, okay, so the plot to Crysis 3 is that the Cell Corporation from, I think, the second game have kind of harnessed some Ceph alien technology to give free energy away to people, except it was kind of a trap, and once you get the free energy, you're locked into this sort of payment program that you can never really work off. It's really weird because it's supposed to be free energy, and yet they kind of lure them into this work program where they have to then start working for Cell to get out of their debt, and they never really do. It's mostly based in New York, which is now kind of an overgrown, jungly type of biodome, and they've kind of got the scope of New York pretty well in there. The problem is you kind of hear about all the plight of all these people, and you never see them. It's like you have these kind of logs, like audio logs and stuff, going on about the backstory and how, you know, this whole process came about and how the city. How the city's downfall came about, and I'm listening to these thinking, that'd be a good game. I wish I was playing that game and not like the boring aftermath afterwards, which is populated purely by paramilitary corporations and later aliens, and about 4 rebels, all of whom have speaking parts. It's just, I don't know, it seems, for all the backstory they provide, it seems so empty. So yeah, the 4 speaking characters, there's your friend Psycho from the first game, who now has a different voice. He sounds a bit more like Ray Winstone now. Claire, the leader of the rebels, and a guy called Raish, who is not from Batman. He's not Ra's al Ghul. He's a different guy called Raish, who invented the nanosuits, who just happens to be like one of the only rebels hanging around at the rebel base, of course. And out of this tiny cast, they managed a couple of betrayals, an amount of deaths that I won't reveal. They kind of squeeze all these kind of cliched video game moments into such a tiny group of characters. And while having a small cast can sometimes be really good for making emotional connections and kind of building up your interest in the characters, so you have just like this endless amount of people you're interacting with. It just doesn't work here, because when they've made the scope of the world so big, making the cast of characters so small just seems really incongruous and strange. And so when you're playing through it all, it's kind of like, I don't care about this. I don't care that the Ceph are here. I don't care that Prophet goes on about the Alpha Ceph endlessly. The only context I have for my actions is that with the nanosuit, cloaking and being the Predator and taking out a few enemies with a bow is kind of fun. And that is kind of fun. I'm perfectly happy with that. It's just without context. You go to a big room full of 10 or 12 people, and you take them out with your Crysis skills, and either with your guns or bow, or sneaking up behind them, and stealth killing them or going past them. And then you go to the next big room and you do the same thing, and then later you're doing it with aliens. There's a boss fight, there's an obligatory driving bit, there's an obligatory on-rails, you're shooting out of a VTOL bit, and it's all done fine. It's all competent and slick. It just has no heart to it whatsoever, and I will forget about it instantly, having now finished the game. So yeah, it's Crysis 3 single player.
The actual the gameplay itself, regardless of the context, I assume that's still pretty good fun though, in terms of being the Predator.
Yeah, and I want to emphasise that is still entertaining. And if you, it's tricky because I can't even say if you don't care about the story, then that's still good. I mean, that's true to an extent, but the story imposes itself and tries to intrude on you so often that you can't quite divorce the whole gameplay mechanic aspects from the story because it's so much. It's so there.
My problem with the Crysis series, I think, is that I'm not sure the developers actually know what made the first Crysis so good. Because Crysis worked for much the same reasons. It didn't really have a huge focus on plot. I mean, there were these other characters, you didn't really know what was going on, but for most of the fun parts of the game, it was essentially just a really big sandbox. Patrols and a few sub-objectives, and you basically predated your way along. And that was really good fun. It looked really, really nice. You had lots and lots of tactical avenues for approaching every single encounter. Then Crysis 2 came along, and it was very plot-heavy and really, really linear. It was a lot more of a corridor shooter. There was still the stealth and still the Predator aspects, but it didn't work quite so well because it wasn't nearly so open. You didn't have the range of options that you did the first time around. And now Crysis 3 kind of sounds like it's dialed that back a little bit towards the first game, but it's still got the same problem that it's taking itself far too seriously in terms of plot, which isn't really what anyone played Crysis for.
No, it's certainly not a sandbox by any means. It's also not. I wouldn't say it's a corridor shooter. It's a room shooter. It's big rooms, occasionally fairly big areas, but not sandbox by any means. That's
sandbox is possibly a little bit far for what Crysis was, but I mean it was for the most part really big, wide open areas, sort of a kilometre stretch of jungle and beach and rocks. You could go through however you wanted, and that was kind of what made it work. That was what made it so nice.
I mean, there's one particular level on in the single player which I liked a lot, which is where you're kind of infiltrating a dam. You have to infiltrate the dam and then blow it up, and that's a cool level. It kind of reminds me of a little, I don't know, like something that might be in Deus Ex or something like that. And there the sort of context and skills work pretty well together. It seems like, yeah, I've got a purpose here. I'm going to go in the dam. I'm going to blow up the dam. And then even there, it's like, well, where are the people who are working at the dam? Why is it just like soldiers hanging out? How is this dam still functioning without any engineers, without any, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like weirdly missing something. And it was still fun to do that level, certainly. It's just like there was this nagging thing, like, what? This doesn't seem like a real place. This doesn't seem like it's a little bit incongruous. I will say that the multiplayer is pretty good because it can be completely divorced from any sort of plot and is just people being Predator, trying to kill each other with quite entertaining results. I was playing it a bit last night, and me and another person who was stealth basically just ran into each other, and it was a case of who can get the gun up quickest, which was quite entertaining. And that has a very fun mode called the Hunter mode, where the majority of people start off as bog standard cell troopers, and a couple of other people are super stealth, like perma stealth cloaked hunters. Their job is to take down all of the cell people within 2 minutes, and the cell people's job is to simply survive. And that's great because as the numbers reduce to like 10 and 5, and then maybe there's only 2 of you left, and you've got like 20 seconds. That's really, really good. I like that mode a lot. And yeah, even
Asymmetric.
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to make the comment. Asymmetrical multiplayer is great. When it's done, it's so much more fun, to me at least, than your bog standard deathmatch or team deathmatch or capture the flag or what have you. I really, really like asymmetrical multiplayer, where each side has their own advantages and disadvantages. And I will quickly point out that for this reason, Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow is still one of my favouriteest multiplayer games ever. Right, back to Crysis.
Yeah, no, that mode works really well. But I would say even the bog standard modes, which has all of them, the deathmatch, the essential King of the Hill, capture the flag, point capture stuff, that's all pretty good too. Introducing the suit mechanics into that adds just a little twist to it, and it makes it quite good fun. It's the usual deal, like every major FPS multiplayer since Call of Duty. It's grinding for unlocks and leveling up, and I think last night I unlocked about 20 different dog tags for doing different random things, which I give no shit about whatsoever. But you know,
is it worth it then? Is it like maybe the single player is a bit average, should I say, or devoid of life? Is it worth it for the multiplayer?
I mean, I wouldn't get it purely for like say hunter mode. I wouldn't get it just for that. Is it worth it? Well, if you fancy something, if you're into that kind of FPS multiplayer, you fancy a bit of a break from some of the others that you might have been playing. You know, it's pretty solid. It holds up. It doesn't, aside from hunter mode, it doesn't do anything extraordinary. But it is. I had a good laugh with it. It's very hard for me to judge multiplayer modes like this because I mean the people who are dedicated to playing these full time and like leveling up to level 50 and stuff, which I, as a reviewer, I'm afraid, newsflash, I don't have time to do that. You know, people like that are probably going to be a lot more nitpicky about like, oh, this weapon's imbalanced or this map doesn't work for some convoluted, obscure reason, and that's the kind of thing that I wish I was able to pick up on as a reviewer, but I can't. I don't have that kind of time and expertise to put into it. But from the hours that I've put into it, I liked it. I don't know if it's worth buying Crysis 3 for alone, but it's certainly a nice solid addition, and I'd say it's the stronger of the two out of the single player and multiplayer certainly. That is my view, and that is well, that's basically what I'm going to say in the review as well, which will be along later this week. I think Thursday is when that's probably going to be up. Of course, we'll have a Tomb Raider review on the way fairly soon-ish. Don't want to put too much pressure on you, Tim. But...
No, it's alright. That will probably be, I don't know, maybe Friday. Possibly around Thursday-ish as well, we'll say. It kind of depends. The single player is a bit longer than I thought it was, and I still have to delve into multiplayer, so we will see.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, hopefully this week.
I just remembered then that Tomb Raider has multiplayer as well, doesn't it? But since you said you haven't delved into it.
Not yet, no.
Yeah. Paul, what else is coming up? Do we have any...
Always ask me this every week.
What?
And you're always unprepared.
What sexy announcements?
Do you know what?
I've done a few.
But I'm always unprepared because usually if I schedule something, some public... That's it. Yeah, there's a victory interview up on the site this morning that was announced at midnight last night, and that's them. How much are they looking for? 700,000.
They are looking for 700,000, which is quite a big ask, I would have thought. But we'll see. We'll see
so
how they do with that.
That's Petroglyphs World War II RTS online.
No, it's not an RTS, Paul.
No, it's not an RTS. But if I say RTS, people will kind of get what it is.
It's got RTS movement and controls, but no base building or resource development.
Right. That
sort of RTS skirmish, I guess.
A MOBA type thing.
Sort of.
They're just over $7,000, or sorry, just under $8,000 at the moment, I think. So they're about 1% of the way there.
Yeah. They've made about, if I'm calculating correct, when I looked earlier, they've made about $4,000 in about probably 5 hours.
Well,
that's not bad. I wish I could make $4,000 in 5 hours.
Me too. Am I going to get $4,000 for my Crysis review?
What? Because it's taken that long?
Because it's going to be that good. It's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth the wait, guys. Trust me. So much better than all the other Crysis 3 reviews. Yes. So yeah, look forward to all of that coming up on the site, and also look forward to our next podcast broadcast.
No, wait. I'm going to. You haven't done it again. You haven't plugged to the usual.
It's because I've given up. I've given up plugging Facebook.
Right. Okay. I'm going to plug it. You can always check us out on Facebook and Twitter, as we put stuff up there that doesn't always go on the site, and it's a good way to keep up with what's going on too. So do check those out, and you'll see it on your screen.
And our
you haven't plugged the Steam group either.
Right,
God, yeah.
Which I don't believe I'm actually. I don't think I'm a moderator for that group, which is quite offensive.
We're deliberately keeping you out of moderating the Steam group because we have a feeling, Tim, that you might just hate on everyone. You might just hate everyone so much that you just kick them and it would just be you left.
Would I do that? Really?
Yes.
Is that how little you think of me?
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to be a moderator, but I'm not sure what I can actually do. I haven't really figured out what my moderating powers are.
That's on steampower.com/IncGamersCom. You can go there and check it out, say hello, hit us up for games if we're on, especially Tim. Hit Tim up for lots of games.
Yeah, because it's not like we're going to be busy reviewing stuff or anything like that.
No, Tim will drop everything.
Indeed. And that is it now. So tune in next week for another In-Games broadcast. We'll probably be live streaming again. Who knows? Skype might survive for the whole period of the broadcast next time, if we're really lucky. So yes, we'll hopefully be with you again.